In the quiet, early hours of a crisp autumn morning, a single motorcycle stood parked outside a small town diner, its chrome catching the pale sunlight and reflecting the beginning of a day that no one could have predicted would become a defining chapter for an entire biker club. Inside that diner, the vice president of the Steel Mercies Motorcycle Club, a man known across counties for his calm resolve and firm leadership, sat with his wife, Emily, a gentle school counselor loved by everyone who knew her. Their world was peaceful, simple, steady, but life has a way of shifting violently in a single moment, and what would happen to Emily later that day would send shockwaves through the club and eventually reveal a loyalty so powerful it would leave the entire town stunned. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, loyalty, and standing up for what's right, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Heartwarming Kindness. It truly helps us continue telling meaningful stories. Emily had planned to take her car that afternoon to visit a family who needed help after a school incident involving their son, but her car wouldn't start, so she decided to take her husband's spare bike, a smaller, comfortable cruiser she often rode when weather allowed. She strapped on her helmet, adjusted her gloves, and set out on the quiet back road that led toward the edge of town. She loved the feeling of riding, the freedom, the smooth rhythm of the engine beneath her, the wind brushing against her jacket. She never imagined it would carry her into danger. About halfway along her route, Emily noticed a group of men on the side of the road. They weren't bikers, no patches, no colors, nothing that indicated a club or brotherhood. Instead, they looked rough and disjointed, like a scattered group of drifters passing through. She slowed slightly, unsure if they were in need of help, but before she could react, one of them stepped out of the ditch and waved at her. Instinctively, she eased the throttle and stopped a few feet away, thinking perhaps they were stranded or injured, but the moment her bike settled into silence, she felt a surge of unease. One man approached too quickly. Another circled around her. A third grabbed the back of her bike. She immediately knew something was wrong. Panic surged through her as she tried to restart the engine, but a hand slammed against her handlebars, forcing the machine off balance. Before she could even shout, rough hands yanked her off the bike and shoved her to the ground. The world spun, gravel scraping her palms, fear crushing her breath. The thugs weren't after money, they weren't after the bike. Their aggression was fueled by something darker, anger, drunkenness, or the simple thrill of overpowering someone vulnerable. Emily tried to call out, tried to fight back, but every attempt was met with more cruelty. She curled up, terrified, clutching her helmet as the assault intensified. But fate works in mysterious ways. Just minutes before, a man driving a delivery truck had seen the group gathered suspiciously by the road. Something about the scene didn't feel right, so he slowed down. When he noticed the bike suddenly toppled and Emily shoved to the ground, he immediately dialed 911 and then made another call, a call that would change everything. He dialed the Steel Mercies Motorcycle Club. Within seconds, every phone in the clubhouse buzzed. The vice president, Emily's husband, was in the middle of a maintenance workshop meeting when he answered. The moment he heard what happened, his entire world froze, and then something inside him ignited. Without hesitation, he rallied the club. In moments, engines roared to life, echoing like thunder across the valley. A formation of bikes burst from the clubhouse, tearing down the highway with a fury that matched the pounding in the VP chest. The Steel Mercies weren't a gang. They weren't criminals. They were protectors, men and women bound by fierce loyalty, mutual respect, and an unspoken vow to defend their family, no matter the cost. By the time they reached the back road, the thugs had dragged Emily toward the trees, trying to force her deeper into the woods. But they had no idea what was coming. The sound hit first, a wall of engines, deep, guttural, powerful, rolling across the quiet landscape like a storm approaching. The thugs froze. Emily, dazed but conscious, recognized the sound instantly. Relief swelled inside her chest as tears blurred her vision. Then the first row of bikes appeared, each rider wearing the emblem she knew so well, the steel, winged Mercy crest. Behind them, a line of headlights stretched down the road farther than she could see. The club had come, not in anger alone, but in unity, determination, and unbreakable love. The thugs panicked, dropping Emily and attempting to flee, but the club spread out, surrounding them in a controlled, strategic formation. Not one rider acted recklessly. Not one raised a fist without reason. They acted with discipline, focusing first on Emily. Several riders rushed to her side, kneeling beside her, shielding her from view, assessing her injuries with tender care. The VP slid to his knees next to his wife, his voice trembling as he touched her face, checking every wound, every bruise. Emily clung to him, overwhelmed with relief. Meanwhile, the rest of the club ensured the attackers were stopped, not violently, but firmly. They held them down, retrieved their weapons, and waited for the sheriff to arrive, which happened quickly thanks to the earlier 911 call. The sheriff, long familiar with the Steel Mercies' honorable reputation, took one look at the scene and understood exactly what had happened. As Emily was lifted into an ambulance, her husband stayed by her side, holding her hand, refusing to let go. She was shaken, bruised, deeply traumatized, but alive. The thought of what might have happened if help hadn't come when it did left the entire club silent with gratitude. Back at the club's compound, the riders gathered around a fire pit as night fell, their faces lit by flames and shadows of emotion. They weren't celebrating vengeance. They weren't seeking recognition. They were united in relief, in gratitude, and in renewed dedication to protect their community. Over the next few days, the club members took shifts guarding Emily and her home. They repaired her bike, restored it beautifully, and returned it to her as a symbol of strength and resilience. Slowly, Emily began to heal. She found comfort in the presence of the very people who had saved her. The club she had always supported, but now understood on a deeper level. The town, too, reacted strongly. News spread like wildfire, how a gentle counselor was attacked, and how an entire club rose like an army to defend her. People who once misunderstood bikers saw them in a new light, not as rebels, but as guardians. Kind hearts wrapped in leather and steel. One afternoon, weeks later, Emily visited the clubhouse for the first time since the incident. The VP helped her walk inside, where the club had prepared a quiet welcome. But instead of cheers or noise, they simply stood in reverent silence as she approached. She walked slowly to the center of the room, looked at the faces of the people who had risked everything for her, and felt overwhelming gratitude. Something changed in her that day. She realized that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet resolve of people who show up when you need them most. Sometimes it's brotherhood. Sometimes it's family that isn't bound by blood. And the Steel Mercies were exactly that family. She made a commitment to use her voice and her work as a counselor to advocate for victims of violence, to support community unity, and to stand up for those who couldn't stand for themselves. She became a symbol of resilience and hope, not just because she survived, but because she refused to let fear define her future. The club supported her every step of the way. They escorted her to community events. They helped organize charity rides for victims of assault. They turned tragedy into purpose together. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Heartwarming Kindness. Your support helps us spread stories of hope, loyalty, and humanity. Special request, comment family stands together. If you believe loyalty is stronger than fear. Emily's story became a legend in her town, not because of the attack, but because of what followed. A community united. A club that showed what true loyalty looks like. A woman who rose from trauma with strength brighter than before. And in the quiet moments of her life, when she rides again or sits beside her husband at the diner, Emily remembers one truth clearly. Family is not always blood. Sometimes it's the people who hit the road the moment your name is called.